She has been stealing from this family for years. My brother didn't even lower his voice when he said it. He was standing at the head of the conference table, one hand flat on the mahogany surface, the other pointing directly at me. The estate attorney shifted in his chair. My aunt pressed her lips together. My brother's wife, Dana, sat with her arms crossed and a small, satisfied smile she wasn't bothering to hide. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I looked down at my watch. 11:47 a.m. He had exactly 4 minutes before everything he'd built on top of my silence came apart. Drop a yes in the comments if someone has ever stood in a room full of people who were supposed to love you and told a lie so big, so rehearsed, that for 1 second you almost believed it yourself. I want to know how many of us have been in that room. My brother. I'll call him Marcus because that is his name, and he has earned every syllable of what is about to follow. Adjusted his cufflinks and continued his performance. He had practiced this. You could tell by the way he paced his breathing, the way he made eye contact with our aunt first, then the attorney, then our 2 cousins seated along the wall. He knew exactly who in that room needed to be convinced and in what order. The occasion was the formal reading and distribution of our grandmother's estate. She had passed 6 weeks earlier, quietly, in the house she had lived in for 41 years. She was 83. She had outlasted 2 husbands, 1 recession, a hip replacement, and every single attempt my brother had made over the past decade to get her to change her will. Her name was Eleanor. Everyone called her Nell. She called me her shadow because from the time I was 7 years old until the week she died, I showed up. Every Sunday, every birthday, every hospital visit, every Tuesday when she just wanted someone to play cards with and complain about the news. I was there. Marcus was there too. Selectively, strategically, he showed up when there was something to ask for or something to be seen doing. I am 31 years old. I work as a forensic accountant. I find fraud for a living. I look at numbers the way other people read body language. I notice when things don't add up. It is not a skill I chose to apply to my own family. It is a skill my family chose to require of me. Let me tell you what Marcus had been doing for the last 3 years. He had been managing our grandmother's finances. She asked him to because he was the oldest, and because she came from a generation that trusted the oldest son with those things automatically, the same way they trusted a firm handshake and a good haircut. She gave him power of attorney over her checking account. She meant it as a convenience. He treated it as an inheritance advance. The transfers were small at first, 400 here, 900 there. A loan for a home repair that was never repaid. Then they grew. A $6,000 transfer to a joint account only he could access. Then $14,000 labeled medical coordination fees, a category that does not exist. Then a recurring monthly withdrawal of $2,200 described as household management, which would have been reasonable if it hadn't been depositing directly into an LLC he had incorporated using his wife Dana's maiden name. I found all of this 8 months before our grandmother died. I did not confront him. I did not tell our aunt. I did not call a lawyer. Not yet. I want you to understand something about the decision I made in that moment, because it is the part of this story that people struggle with the most. When you find out someone is stealing from someone you love, your first instinct is to stop it immediately. Protect her. Call the police. End it now. But I had watched this pattern before. I had seen what happens when you catch someone like Marcus at $6,000. He apologizes. He cries. He has an explanation. He blames stress, the economy, a misunderstanding about what was a loan versus a gift. The family rallies. Our aunt says he means well. Our grandmother forgives him because she is 82 years old and she does not want to die estranged from her firstborn grandchild. And in 18 months, he does it again. Except this time, he is more careful. I needed something that couldn't be forgiven or explained away. I needed a number and a pattern that would follow him out of every room he ever tried to walk into clean. So I watched, and I documented, and I waited. My grandmother knew something was wrong with the accounts. She mentioned it once, obliquely, over cards. She said, "I feel like the money doesn't stretch the way it used to." I told her I would look into it. She patted my hand and dealt the next hand and never brought it up again. She trusted me. That trust was the most valuable thing anyone has ever given me, and I was going to honor it the only way I knew how. I set up quiet alerts on the account, not to stop the transfers, to document them with timestamps, device IDs, and IP addresses. Every single transaction Marcus made from that point forward was logged, screenshotted, and backed up to a cloud account only I had access to. I also began quietly researching the estate itself. I pulled the deed on the house. I reviewed the most recent version of the will, which our grandmother's original attorney had on file, an attorney Marcus did not know I had a relationship with because he had been our grandmother's attorney for 22 years, and I had been the one driving her to his office since I got my license at 17. Marcus believed the will was whatever he had told the family it was. He had been the one to describe it at holidays, casually, like he had already read it. A general split, everything divided equally among the grandchildren. He said it with the confidence of a man who had already confirmed the outcome. He was wrong, but he didn't know that yet. When our grandmother passed, Marcus moved quickly. Within 10 days, he had positioned himself as the family's point of contact with the estate. He had already spoken to a different attorney, one he had chosen himself, one who had never met our grandmother, one who was operating entirely off documents Marcus provided. He had scheduled the estate meeting at that attorney's office, and he had framed the invitation to me as a courtesy. "You should be there," he said on the phone, "since you were so close to her." The warmth in his voice was designed to communicate that I had already lost and didn't know it yet. I confirmed I would attend. I did not tell him what I would be bringing. The morning of the meeting, Marcus walked in with Dana and their attorney, a man in a gray suit who carried himself like someone accustomed to winning on paperwork alone. My aunt was already seated. My two cousins, Marcus's allies since childhood, were in chairs along the wall. They had that particular energy of people who have been briefed on the story they are supposed to believe and are ready to perform their belief loudly if needed. I came alone. I sat down across from Marcus. I set a single blue accordion folder on the table in front of me. I folded my hands on top of it. I did not open it. Marcus looked at the folder once. Then he looked at me. Then he started talking. "She has been stealing from this family for years." I want to describe his argument the way it actually landed in that room because it was well constructed and you should understand how it worked. He didn't accuse me of taking cash. He accused me of something more sophisticated and more designed to be unverifiable. He said I had exerted undue influence over our grandmother, that I had isolated her, that my constant presence in her life was not devotion but manipulation, that I had used my closeness with her to position myself in the will at the expense of the rest of the family. He had a document to support this, a statement, he said, that he had written down during a conversation with our grandmother 6 months before she died, in which she had allegedly expressed doubts about whether I truly had her best interests at heart. He slid a copy across the table to me, typed, 2 paragraphs, signed at the bottom in handwriting that looked approximately like hers but had the slightly oversized loops of someone copying a signature from memory rather than producing their own. Our aunt made a quiet sound. The cousins exchanged a look. Marcus sat back and waited for me to unravel. I read the document. I set it down. I looked at Marcus the way I look at a spreadsheet with a formula error. Not with anger, with interest. With the specific, focused attention of someone who has just identified exactly where the problem is and is deciding the most efficient way to resolve it. "Are you finished?" I said. He blinked. He had expected something else. He looked at his attorney, who nodded slightly, and he said yes. He believed the evidence spoke for itself. I said, "Okay, then I'd like to share mine." I opened the accordion folder. The first document I placed on the table was a certified copy of our grandmother's actual will, the one filed with her original attorney, executed 14 months prior, with a notary stamp and 2 independent witnesses. In it, she had left the house and 60% of the liquid estate to me. To Marcus, she had left her car, her jewelry collection, and a flat sum of $15,000. To each of the cousins, smaller sums. To our aunt, a specific piece of furniture she had always admired. The room went very quiet. Our aunt leaned forward. One of the cousins said, "Wait," out loud to no one in particular. Marcus's face did something complicated. He started to speak and then stopped. His attorney was looking at the document with the expression of a man who had just understood that his client had not been fully honest with him. I gave them a moment. Then I placed the second document on the table. "This," I said, "is a transaction record. 41 months of transfers from our grandmother's personal checking account into an LLC called Brightfield Home Services, registered in Delaware, using a name I'm sure the room will recognize." I looked at Dana. Dana looked at the table. "The total," I continued, "is $224,000. transferred in increments structured specifically to stay below the federal reporting threshold of $10,000 per transaction. That structuring is not an accident. It is a federal crime called smurfing, and it carries its own charges independent of the underlying fraud. Marcus stood up. Those were authorized payments. For what services? I asked. He opened his mouth. Specifically, I said, for what specific services did our grandmother pay Brightfield Home Services $224,000 over 41 months? Because she did not have a housekeeper. She did not have a property manager. She mowed her own lawn with a riding mower until she was 79, so I am genuinely curious what services were being rendered. Silence. I placed the third document on the table. These are the IP logs for every transaction over $5,000. They originate from a single device, a laptop registered to your home address. I looked at Marcus. I pulled the device registration from the wireless carrier records. I had legal authorization to do so as a named party in the estate. Marcus's attorney put his pen down. That was the moment I knew the professional in the room had made his calculation. There is also this, I said, and I placed the last document in the stack. 2 weeks ago, I submitted a formal complaint to the State Attorney General's Elder Financial Abuse Unit, along with a copy of everything I just showed you. They opened an investigation. That is not a threat. It is a fact. It has already happened. Our aunt made a sound that was not quite a word. Marcus looked at me with an expression I had never seen on him before. Not anger, not arrogance. Something smaller. He looked like a man who had walked through a door expecting a hallway and found a cliff. You set me up, he said. I documented you, I said. There's a difference. You set yourself up. His attorney leaned over and said something quietly in his ear. Marcus shook his head once, hard. His attorney said it again. Here's what I want you to understand about the next few minutes, because this is the part that matters most and that gets left out of stories like this. He didn't immediately collapse. He tried one more thing. He looked at our aunt. He looked at her with the particular expression he had been using on her since they were children, the one that said, "Help me." The one that activated whatever reflex she had developed over decades of smoothing things over for him. He said, "She's twisting everything. You know how she is. You know how she always has to be the one who—" Our aunt looked at the documents on the table. She looked at the total. $224,000. She looked at the forged signature on the statement he had produced. She had known our grandmother for 60 years. She had seen that woman sign her name 10,000 times. She looked at Marcus and said, "I can't help you with this." That was when Marcus sat down. His attorney advised him, in language that was careful and professional and unmistakable, that his client would not be contesting the will today and would need to consult separately regarding the matters raised by the transaction documentation. Marcus signed the acknowledgement of the actual will. His hand was not steady. As he stood to leave, he looked at me one more time. He said, "She would have wanted the family to stay together." I said, "She wanted the family to be honest." Those aren't the same thing. He and Dana left. His attorney followed without making eye contact with anyone. I sat in that room with my aunt and my cousins for a while after. My aunt cried. Not for Marcus. I don't think for Marcus. For something more complicated. For the version of him she had always hoped would turn out to be real. I understood that. I didn't try to talk her out of it. One of my cousins, the younger one, the one who had always been kind to me even when she was following Marcus's lead because it was easier, said she was sorry. I told her she didn't need to be. She hadn't done the thing. She had just been in the room. 3 months later, Marcus was formally charged with elder financial abuse and wire fraud. The amounts involved crossed state lines due to the Delaware LLC structure, which elevated it to a federal matter. His attorney, the one in the gray suit, withdrew from representation before the arraignment. The house is mine now. I go there on Sundays. I sit in the same chair at the kitchen table where I used to play cards with my grandmother, and I drink coffee. And sometimes I just sit in the quiet of a room that still smells faintly like her, like cedar and hand lotion and old paperback books, and I let myself feel the full weight of having kept my promise to her. She trusted me to look into it. I looked into it. There is something people get wrong about patience. They think it means waiting passively. They think it means accepting what is being done to you while you hope something changes. That is not patience. That is patience. That is surrender with a polite face on it. Real patience is active. It is building while someone else is burning. It is watching and documenting and knowing exactly when the moment has come. Not a moment too early, when the evidence is thin, and not a moment too late, when the damage is irreversible. Real patience is understanding that the person who controls the timing controls the outcome. My brother thought he was faster than me because he moved first. He didn't understand that I had already finished. If you are sitting with a yes in the comments right now, if you know this room, if you have been in this meeting, if you have sat across from someone who has looked you in the eye and built a story on top of your silence, I want you to hear this directly. Your silence is not the same as your consent. Your patience is not the same as your weakness. And the person who is the most dangerous person in any room is very rarely the loudest one. Take your time. Get your time bits in order, and when the moment comes, open the folder. There is a version of this story where I confront my brother the moment I find the first transfer, where I call the family together, lay out what I know, and demand an explanation, where I am loud and righteous and immediate. I used to think that version was the brave one. I don't think that anymore. What I know now, what this whole experience carved into me in a way I won't forget, is that the outcome of any confrontation is almost entirely determined by the preparation that happened before it. Marcus walked into that conference room believing he had already won because he had moved quickly. He had positioned himself, recruited allies, fabricated documentation, and framed the narrative. He thought speed was the same as strength. It isn't. Speed without foundation is just noise that arrives early. I spent 8 months building something he couldn't dismantle in an afternoon. Not because I am smarter than him. I don't know that I am. But because I was willing to do the unglamorous work. The logging, the cross-referencing, the quiet conversations with attorneys, the patience of watching money leave an account I could have frozen and choosing not to, because I understood that a small crime stopped early protects the criminal more than the victim. I needed the full picture. I needed the pattern, not just the moment. That is what I mean when I say intelligence is not a talent. It is a discipline. It is the choice, made over and over again, to understand the situation completely before you act on it. Marcus acted on instinct and greed. I acted on information. The difference in those outcomes is not luck, and the ethics of it matter to me. I want to be clear about that, because I think people sometimes hear a story like this and they take away the wrong lesson. They think the point is to be ruthless, to be colder than the person who wronged you, to outmaneuver them and feel nothing. That is not what happened here. What I felt throughout those 8 months was not coldness. It was grief and love and the very specific ache of watching someone betray a person who deserved better. I documented every transfer and I cried in my car more than once on the drive home. Doing the right thing and feeling the full weight of it are not opposites. They belong together. My grandmother trusted me because I had shown up, consistently, without an agenda, for years before it mattered. That trust was not a strategy. It was a relationship. And because it was real, it held up under every pressure Marcus applied to it. You cannot fabricate that kind of foundation. You can only build it, slowly, by being who you say you are when no one is watching. The final thing I want to say is this. What happened to Marcus was not something I did to him. It was the accumulated result of every choice he made across 3 years, meeting the record I kept of those choices. He built his own outcome. I simply made sure it was not buried. There is a principle at work in that, not mystical, not abstract. Just the straightforward reality that actions leave evidence, and evidence, when handled carefully, tells the truth regardless of who would prefer it didn't. My grandmother's house is quiet on Sunday mornings. The light comes in the same way it always did. I sit at the same table. And I think about what she said to me once near the end, over a hand of cards she was definitely cheating at. The ones who are patient enough to wait for the right moment are the ones who get to decide how the story ends. She was right. She almost always was.